The screen brightens. You read a message that instructs you to take one of the Q-tips provided to remove the plastic and gently swab the inside of your cheek, and so you do this as well, and why not? No one can see you. What would anyone care? You then deposit this into the slot as directed and can't help but grin at the disclaimer, which reads, "There is a 1% margin of error in a pursuit like this, and that the company, DNAMIX, is not liable for any stress your new potential may cause." Yet, still you carry on. You wait for the result. But why? That is the question. Perhaps it is because people like you, people like us, when we are joking, say, "What is the worst that could happen?" But when we are honest, and when we are alone, we wonder, what is the best? 1. The Hubbards. After 39 years and 11-plus months, Douglas Hubbard had finally had enough of being Douglas Hubbard. So, for his 40th birthday, just last Friday, he bought himself a trombone. It was a thing he'd long wanted, and now that it was purchased, Douglas felt this object made him an entirely new man. He was so excited, in fact, he spent his entire weekend polishing the instrument until it nearly glowed, standing in front of the full-length mirror in his and his wife's bedroom, spinning aloud out magical phrases like Dizzy Douglas, Herbie Hubbard, and Thelonious Doug. He dreamt up enough jazzy nicknames in the first few days alone to sustain several impressive careers, and yet had not even put lip to mouthpiece. Why bother? When a person finds as much joy as Douglas did in simply imagining themselves to be someone else, the actual work required to change, along with so many other things they hold dear, can be forgotten. But tonight, after clumsily blaring his way through his first trombone lesson at a friend's apartment, Douglas Hubbard returned home to his wife, moved aside the wooden birdhouses she'd been building those past months, and set his trombone case down on the table. "Well," he said, "it's official. I can't play a note." "Don't be silly," his wife said. Then she began to cry. This was unusual. Cherilyn Hubbard was typically warm and upbeat at this hour, which she called their wine time, and Douglas always looked forward to seeing her. Through 15 years of what they would both call a happy and uncomplicated marriage, she had remained red-headed and faithful, busy and beautiful in her unpretentious way, and as quick to offer love and encouragement to Douglas as she'd been on the days he first fell for her. But on this night, she stood alone at the far end of their modest kitchen and, instead of greeting Douglas with a hug at the door, wiped her eyes with the undersides of her wrists. She then leaned heavily against their blue and white countertop, which was covered in flipped-open magazines. Beside her, a pot of water boiled quietly on the stove. Near the sink, a box of macaroni and cheese stood unopened. Next to that, Douglas knew, because the day was Wednesday, 2 hamburger patties sizzled over low, greasy heat in the skillet. Douglas said nothing. He instead removed the blazer he had draped over his arm and placed it on a chair, hung his keys on a hook screwed into the wall for that purpose. He then took off his hat, a brown woolen beret he'd taken to wearing since he bought the trombone, and arranged the wayward hairs on his balding head. He knew Cherilyn hadn't been feeling well, some powerful headaches lately, a dizzy spell or two. He'd been meaning to talk to her about this. The amount of aspirin bottles he'd found about the house, the antihistamine nose spray she'd taken to cupping in her palm those past mornings, the naps she took at odd hours. These are the minor changes to a marital landscape that can worry a thoughtful husband like Douglas. Yet he chalked most of it up to stress. Cherilyn was busy of late in atypical ways. She'd signed up to sell her own handmade birdhouses at the Deerfield bicentennial that weekend, would have her own booth on the square both Saturday and Sunday.